Tonight, we're live from downtown Bismarck at the historic Peacock Alley for a special episode of Plain Talk. Joining us are Senate Majority Leader David Hogue, and at least it changes the narrative,
I don't like that at all. That song has been played many times.
and House Minority Leader Hogue Ista.
You know, one of the things you can really do well as a legislator is become a subject matter expert in something.
Then former state senators Jessica Bell and Erin Oban stop by. How glad are you guys that you're not in the legislature right now? Scale of 1 to 10.
11. Yeah, 15.
Plus, we'll discuss the latest legislative updates and answer a few audience questions. Stay tuned. Plain Talk, live in Bismarck, starts now. You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay, I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right? Welcome to Plain Talk. Happy to be with you. This is our first ever live show, which when we say live, it's fake news because it's not actually live. We're recording this. But it's live as in we are in person. We are at Peacock Alley in Bismarck, where the owner has made the strange decision that what his diners needed to enjoy their meal and drinks was two chubby men haranguing them about politics from the balcony.
Whoa. Be easy with the body shaming here. It's early in the night. Encourage people to eat as many wings and drink as much beer, and tip your wait staff, please.
Yeah, there's left wings and right wings available. There's a lot of beautiful people here. Chad and I are also here, and we're gonna have a good time. Our guest to open out the show is we went very diverse with our picks. We have a Democrat from the House, Minority Leader Hogue Ista, and we have a Republican from the Senate, Senate Majority Leader David Hogue. Gentlemen, welcome.
Good to be here.
Thanks for being on.
Thanks.
And you know,
Thanks for
I want to start because it was. We're joking here at the beginning. It was a somber day.
Yeah.
Losing a member of the House, Representative Josh Christie, who was just on the show.
Talking about AI probably a month ago.
You know, I just a beautiful Representative Jeremy Olson had just a beautiful tribute to him on the House floor today. A lot of misty eyes out there. He was somebody, Representative Ista, you and I were talking just before the show. One of the there's not a lot of in the dad caucus, you know, with young kids at home. You know, he was somebody also had a expertise in a emerging technology field that was very important. Right. And I guess losing him, it felt like losing somebody who was very serious about politics, and very good-hearted and kind at a time where it doesn't sometimes feel like we have a lot of those around.
Right.
It's a tough loss. I mean, I don't know how you guys feel.
It was just an immensely difficult day in the House. It's been almost a week now since we sort of got word that there was a very serious medical issue with Representative Christie. So I think those of us in the House have had a little bit of time to process what became a finality last evening. And, you know, we've heard so many descriptions of Representative Christie today, and I just remember his warmth, he had this dry wit about him, almost an irreverent sense of humor. I think he would enjoy us being able to joke and laugh a little bit tonight. But, you know, one of the things you can really do well as a legislator is become a subject matter expert in something. And Representative Christie was that for technology policy and AI policy. And I think what speaks so highly to his character is he had developed this AI presentation, and I'm sure he talked to you about it, and it had some fun parts where he used AI to have him, you know, do the Gettysburg Address. He's never spoken those words. And he was speaking Russian at a point, and our Democrats caught wind of it, and Josh, a Republican, said, well, I can give the presentation to you like I do the Republicans, and he did. That's not nothing in this day and age of divisive politics. So just an absolute gem of a human. His wife, Mary, I've worked closely with in constituent service issues when she's filled that role for then Congressman Armstrong. Our hearts just ache for the family, the small children, and the hole that we'll leave in this session, it's not going to be filled.
Senator, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, concur with Representative Ista. He was a rising star within the legislative arena. We had actually had some dialogue about again, coming to our caucus and giving that AI presentation that he gave to the House Majority Caucus. He gave me a little preview of that, and I thought it was both entertaining and informative at the same time, and I could tell he was engaged. And our heart aches as well. He had a couple other bills in the hopper. One of them was House Bill 1360, which was an ethics bill, and I thought it was pretty informed for him. He came over to the Senate and wanted to know the Senate perspective on his House bill, realizing that any bill has to pass the House
That's
and the
weird.
Senate.
That doesn't happen very often.
It doesn't. And I was so impressed by the idea that he wanted to get Senate feedback while his House bill was still passing through the House. And I just thought, okay, this is a rising star within the legislative arena. And I was so impressed. I got to meet his wife today. And yeah, you're right. Your heart just breaks. He's got 3 young daughters, and it's such a tragedy.
Devastating. And I will just say also, in terms of the work that he did on his bills, when he was introducing the AI bills, he called me, a month beforehand and said, hey, I'm calling every single lobbyist who might have some interest or some knowledge about AI to feel you out on how you think about this stuff. And I said, I don't know anything about AI. And he explained the bills in a way that was dumb enough for me to understand. And I think that's a skill when you're an expert in something, to be able to talk about it in a way that people understand. So yeah, a pretty sad day. I watched it online, and it was great to see all the senators come over. Governor Armstrong and all the staff were there. It was a heartbreaking day, and it's going to continue to hurt for a long time.
Well, what happened after Representative Olson gave his speech is the House moved to 8th order, because the thing is, you guys have a job to do.
Right.
And the people's business got to go on. We've only got 80 days. And in fact, Representative Ista, I was talking to you, you guys were supposed to have a late session tonight, which we were kind of we're worried about when you were going to show up, or if you were going to show up and move things around. It sounds like the appropriations committees need more time. But how are you feeling about the pace, or where the House is at? I mean, the House is always the crunch, right? They got twice as many members and a lot more bills. So how do you feel about where the House is at this session?
No, our pace is fine. We've had this record number of bills, the most bills we've had since 1991. But we're getting through the work. The committees, I credit Leader LaForce, Speaker Weiss. They really pushed their chairs to move these bills through the policy committee, get them to appropriations, and we're doing that. And we've been in evening session probably more often and earlier than in my other times here, but that's okay. We're here to do work for 80 days. Let's get it done. I think by the time we gavel out on Friday, we'll have fewer than 100 bills left to act on. I think the Senate's already at that number. And I think we're just set up for success going into that second period of the legislative session.
Senator Hogue, speaking of appropriations, one of the things I'm hearing about appropriations is, with the uncertainty about the federal government and potential cuts. I mean, North Dakota, it's somewhere between 1/4 and 1/3 of our budget comes from federal funds. Are you guys thinking at all about what happens if the federal funding all of a sudden slows down? Are there contingencies that are being put into these appropriations to make sure that these agencies and these other appropriations don't just fall by the wayside?
Yes, we are. And so we had Congresswoman Fedorchak came to visit us yesterday. And, typically when the congressman comes to address the House and the Senate, it's a kind of a pleasant sort of a cordial discussion on the floor, but we were pressing her on a number of issues because we have that uncertainty that you referred to. The tariffs that President Trump is talking about, I mean, that's a big deal for our North Dakota ag economy. And so, we were, instead of talking about, how far are you living away from the Capitol and have you settled in? It's like, okay, what are these tariffs going to do to our ag economy? And so there are a number of those types of issues where we as a legislature would like to stay focused on what the new administration is how it's going to impact our state budgets. The other one, of course, Senator Oban, who continues to deliver for North Dakota, he's talking about trying to procure some money for the Red River Water Supply Project, which is a huge project. Aside from the Fargo diversion, which is the largest construction project in our state's history, Red River is almost right behind it. And, 10 years ago, we didn't think that project would get any federal support. But of course, Senator Hoven has delivered once, and we have this impression that he's going to deliver again. And so that will have a dramatic impact, because with the federal government, they always, they talk about billions the way we talk about millions. And so if the federal government is able to deliver on supporting that project, that affects our appropriation process dramatically.
Representative Ista, how are you feeling about the federal funds and what this could mean for the state if we see dramatic cuts?
Yeah, there's a lot of worry, a lot of anxiety and fear out there in our communities. And there's two sort of separate but related issues. There's the federal budget that's being written now and is going to have to pass through Congress and get signed by the 47th president. That's a constant issue. We always have to worry about what a new Congress, a new administration is going to do to deliver for North Dakota. The new issue is we've got these funds that have already been appropriated, promised, awarded through competitive grants that people can't rely on those promises anymore. So we have nonprofits that, I'm familiar with some that are basically giving payday loans to another nonprofit so that nonprofit can make payroll for its staff. Others are doing reductions in force of their staff. Our research universities up at UND, I represent Grand Forks, they have over $4 million in NIH grants and other grants for the health sciences. They're going to find the next cure for Alzheimer's and ALS if we give them the chance. And these are kids, from all across North Dakota doing this work. And the chaotic nature of these cuts, the DOGE, the OMB cuts, whatever is coming out of Washington, people are feeling that in communities too. Whether, is my WIC next? Is my SNAP next? God forbid, is my Social Security next? And who's got access to all this data? So I do have faith that our congressional delegation and the governor are sort of working those inside channels, the sources they have in Washington. But sometimes people need to hear that publicly too, that we're fighting for you. We're going to be there. We need these investments in North Dakota.
Still ahead on Plain Talk. The original bill allowed them to bank it up for you didn't even like that.
No.
So
And that's just history. That's not me trying to be onerous. It's just, let's look at our history here.
Don't go away. Plain Talk returns in a moment.
There are no shortcuts to making great food, and definitely no microwaves. At Peacock Alley and 40 Steak and Seafood, we don't take shortcuts. And our kitchen has a strict no microwave policy, because great food doesn't come from microwaves. Peacock Alley, 40 Steak and Seafood, great food with no shortcuts.
The work done by North Dakota oil and natural gas workers is working to improve energy independence and national security, working to make America more competitive globally, and working to provide a better today and tomorrow for everyone in North Dakota and our country. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas, advancing the possibilities.
So I want to talk about one of the important things. I mean, Rob and I have not talked about property taxes at all on this podcast. Why don't we start doing that now? Obviously, a big movement towards relief and reform. But I want to talk about something very specific that was in the Fargo Forum today. There was a bill that was passed, House Bill 1144, that has to do with bathrooms and school bathrooms. They passed a bill that said, the House passed a bill, I believe, that said we can't have sinks that are shared by boys and girls as part of the transgender bill. The West Fargo School District said that will cost them around $8 million to implement. Now, if this bill passes the Senate, I hope based on your laughter it's not going to, but if that passes the Senate, the only way to pay for that $8 million renovation is through property taxes. So sometimes I get frustrated with the legislature. There's legislators saying we have to do something about property taxes, and then they make all these decisions that make property taxes go up. Can you guys talk about sort of where we're at with property taxes, that specific example, how you feeling about things?
Take it away, Senator.
Well,
Why don't you look at each other? And,
your question causes me to want to have to go to the bathroom. So
Well, hopefully you'll be able to wash your hands by yourself. We ate for that.
No,
But seriously, I mean, those kind of things. I mean, often legislators don't think about the fact they're doing things to cause property taxes to go up. So maybe it's a House Bills Act. Do you want to talk about that? And then if you want to talk about generally where we're at with property tax reform.
Let's start with that, Bill, because during that floor debate, it was said apparently without irony that sinks are intimate spaces. I have a lot of questions about what's happening in these sinks. The folk sink is particularly intimate. And that article you mentioned from the forum caught my eye today. It referenced my elementary school. I went to Eastwood Elementary in West Fargo, and I've been telling people, I remember the boys went to the right, the girls went to the left. We came out around sink, we hit the pedal, and everybody washed their hands together. I have yet to, have any ill effects from that. And I think sometimes on these culture wars, if your reason for running is to stick it to transgender kids, in North Dakota, you've won the war. Stop fighting the battles. We've lost the plot here if we're talking about intimate spaces of sinks, and it's going to have real consequences. Representative Jonas from West Fargo, member of the school board there, brought this up on the floor, so it passed with full knowledge of that. Just one of those times we might actually need the Senate's help to fix it. But, property tax, they might have acted on those in the Appropriations Committee while we've been waiting to film today, but I think there's a lot of momentum. Governor Armstrong's plan that Representative Nathy was the prime sponsor, that's House Bill 1176.
Representative Nathy asked me to stop calling it the governor's plan, by the way. He told me. He said there's other people on that bill, too.
It's Senator Nathy's plan.
Senator Nathy's
Yes.
Maybe I'll call it the Mike LaFleur plan. We can all agree on that. It's, I think it's got the outlines of a great bill. What I like most about what Governor Armstrong keeps talking about is let's keep the first thing, and that's relief for homeowners. I know our friends in the ag community, in the commercial sector, those that have centrally assessed property, they're asking for a little bit of relief too if we're going to tackle this, but let's keep the first thing first, get those homeowners that primary residence credit.
Well, they have a separate bill, too. Is it? I think Senator Myrtle's on the bill. I forget who the sponsor is.
And there's similar ideas with Speaker Weiss has a bill on the House side. And the House Tax Committee took the strategy. We're going to send about three big ideas: the Nathy, LaFleur, Armstrong bill, the Weiss bill, and the Lauser bill that does a little bit of a bite on. They could probably all be reconciled eventually, but we're at that stage of the session where they're just sort of opening offers, right? The House is going to pass a couple bills, slide it across the table. I doubt the Senate is just going to, pass these bills and we're not going to have a conference committee. So I think a little bit of patience is in order to see where they come. But we're starting to see that outlines of we're going to grow the primary residence credit. We're going to have a side conversation about whether other types of property taxes should see some relief this time. And then on the reform side, I just spoke to the cities, counties, school districts who are meeting in Bismarck today. I spoke to them and said, the train has left the station. Some sort of caps are coming your way. And I know you're being asked to do more with less. It feels unfair, but that's the reality.
Well, it's got to come from somewhere. I mean, if the voters are upset about their property taxes and we're not going to solve that problem locally, then what other tool does the legislature have but caps, Senator?
Well, great question, Rob. Senator Weber, who's the chair of the Finance and Tax Committee, has a separate proposal, which is to cap political subdivisions altogether and say it's not just property tax revenue; it's total revenue. And I don't know that it's going to pass the Senate, but in the idea of caps is not just
the other big one. Sales taxes is kind of already capped in that they can only go 3 points above the state. Right?
But I mean, the idea of caps is not just a cap; it's to control the growth of local government, because that's what drives property taxes. And so, I don't think we should shy away from alternative proposals than just a 3% cap on property taxes.
So it seems like the heavy lifting on the first side of the session was on the House side. It's now coming over to you guys. I mean, so Zach said they're sending over 3 bills, probably maybe more. So what does that process look like with Senator Weber's committee? I mean, are you going to try to combine all those? I mean, I think reform relief, we all agree that's got to be part of it. It can't just be one or the other. But what do you think the Senate ends up doing here?
Well, I think House Bill 1176 will be the vehicle. I know the House wants to send a marriage penalty tax bill. I don't think we'll take a hard look at that, but could be wrong. But I think fundamentally what we want to do is both the House and Senate agree that if there are not caps, we will not have succeeded in passing some significant property tax reform. So I think, as Zach said, talking to the political sub leadership, a cap is going to be established. It's probably going to be 3% with some flexibility for elections to deviate from that. And then I think probably the areas where the House and the Senate are not settled is the House is apparently going to pass over a $1,450 primary residence tax credit. I don't think the Senate will go that high. We passed the $500 primary residence tax credit. If we went to $1,000, we would double that, and we think that would be a pretty good win for this session. But I don't see us doubling it to $1,450.
The governor, when he was on the podcast last week, because I think the cap's the linchpin to all of this. If we don't have an effective cap that really draws down or slows down, it's going to continue to outpace any sort of a credit or buy down that we do, which has been the problem in the past. The governor was really concerned about the NATHE bill that got amended to add essentially letting political subs ask the voters to opt out after 10 years. He kind of implied it's not a cap anymore if that's in there. Are you guys concerned about that as well?
I think the House is, and I think House Appropriations made an amendment to that just this week to take it from 10 down to 4. I think Leader LaFleur brought in an amendment.
That's right. I knew that.
And I've spoken with the governor about that too. I think he says you can drive a grain truck through it, and he might be right. And I'm maybe a little less concerned than he is. I don't think cities and counties are just going to put it on the ballot in perpetuity until it passes. And those folks are responsible to their voters too, right? There's always the power of the ballot box to say, you're not listening to us. We want a tighter cap. Let's do it. But I think there's just going to be a swing, from the county and city's perspective that they're not going to like, where we're going to put some caps on them, and maybe we have to come back in a decade and say we swung too far that way, and let's fix it.
Well, that's and the thing is too. I mean, there comes a point. I think it does change the narrative where if there's a vote that the locals took and they set aside their cap for 4 years or whatever it is, at that point, one of the problems we have now is local property taxes go up and then people complain to the legislature. I think at that point, it changes the narrative a little bit. We could say, listen, you just held a vote 2 cycles ago, and you voted for this, so fix it locally. This is your baby. I like that. I mean, at least it changes the narrative.
I don't like that at all.
You don't like that at all.
We played that song has been played many times.
So you don't want to.
I want to remove as many avenues to get around the cap as possible, because we've seen all of those things play out. Going back to 2009, where it's like, okay, if you have a vote, you can do it. No, we don't want that because it hasn't worked. We're trying to learn from our history, and the fact is, if we impose stringent caps, we're going to come back in 2 years, and if we see that, let's say the rural counties, the rural school districts are really hurting, we're going to adjust. But I think the best approach, as long as we're doing caps, is to be as restrictive as we can be, and then loosen those restrictions when we see that, But to say we're going to have all these safety valves for elections, and you can bank it, and you can go if you're.
So did you not even the original bill allowed them to bank it up for you didn't even like that?
No.
So
and that's just history. That's not me trying to be onerous. It's just, let's look at our history here.
Well, I think that's the time we have. We're going to wrap it up. Gentlemen, thanks for being on.
Thanks for having us.
pleasure.
Coming up on Plain Talk.
If I got paid for correcting Chad Oban,
She'd be a rich woman.
Rich woman.
One thing I'm not getting paid for is being a marriage counselor. So let's get back on topic.
We're doing fine.
Bye.
Don't go away. Plain Talk returns in a moment.
The North Dakota oil and natural gas industry works here, and works here, and here, and even works here. By creating nearly 50,000 jobs statewide and generating billions of tax dollars annually to support our infrastructure, flood protection projects, and our schools. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas, advancing the possibilities.
There are no shortcuts to making great food, and definitely no microwaves. At Peacock Alley and 40 Steak and Seafood, we don't take shortcuts, and our kitchen has a strict no microwave policy, because great food doesn't come from microwaves. Peacock Alley, 40 Steak and Seafood. Great food with no shortcuts.
Welcome back to Plain Talk, where we are at Peacock Alley in downtown Bismarck, spending time with a bunch of people who like to spend an evening watching a podcast.
A bunch is a stretch.
Wow. So
It's a respectable.
that is the voice of the currently unemployed Erin Oban.
It's called a sabbatical, and I'm going to Cancun tomorrow, so I've got no complaints.
Yeah, she's doing better than all of us.
Doing okay.
She's doing it right.
So you guys glad you're on the legislature right
Are you
now?
going to introduce them?
I guess the other one, Jessica Bell. Yeah, the other.
Hi, hello.
Former State Senator Jessica Bell, former State Senator Erin Oban. How glad are you guys that you're not in the legislature right now? Scale of 1 to 10.
11?
Yeah, 15-ish. I don't know. I was up there today, and I have been up a couple of times this session, and I miss the people. It's really, really great to see everybody when I get up there, but it's really nice to take the heavy stuff and hand it over to
By the way, we
folks,
all
so.
knew you were there because they introduced you from the podium.
Don't even start me, Chad.
Yeah.
Don't even start.
How dare you stand in the back of the Senate and not expect to be announced when you're there when they gavel in, Jess? You know how this works.
And she had a sign that said, "I'm Senator Jess, former
Here I
Senator
am.
Jess.
Do you know
Please introduce me."
I don't show up in the legislative chamber very often, but when I do, I get yelled at the sergeant at arms for leaning on the rail.
He told me I couldn't come in because they don't let you in right before a session starts. So I actually had to have another senator come in and
Escort you in.
escort me into
Well,
the
I came well before that ridiculous hour rule. Is Hogue still here? I mean,
Senator Hogue.
Let's page him out on that roll. But I was there on Monday. It was President's Day. Evan, wanted to take in a little bit of the activity, and by activity I mean snacks.
Yes.
Well, but
Good
he also
snacks.
got to go and see the governor. I mean, Evan's access to politicians is really impressive. He's just never on message from my perspective.
I heard he asked the governor where his Dodgers hat was.
Yeah, he did. So he's sort of on message.
Did ask the
Well,
governor.
that is on message. That's good.
So I want to ask, I mean, Erin, you never really answered the question how much you miss it. I know the answer.
I did too. I said 11.
She did.
Okay, you missed it.
I just
Sorry.
had to
Yeah,
beat
weird.
her.
We don't listen to each other. I'm shocked.
So you guys, I think, Erin, you served just short of 8 years. You served 10 years or 8
10.
years. So during your time, I mean, basically 2012 to 2022, 2014 to 2022, what changed? I think both of you, when you were no longer there, saw a different legislature, and based on the fact that you're now saying, I'm glad I'm not there. So what did change over that period of time?
It wasn't fun anymore. And I can't remember exactly when that happened, but there was a shift in the mood and the feel and the focus on the policy, because I'm a super policy geek. I was the policy geek in our little friend group. I was the one who was like, "Oh, give me that. I'm gonna fix it and write it up."
You're adorably boring.
Yes, adorably boring. I love taxes. I love low taxes.
Well, I was gonna say,
I
okay,
love
now
low
we're talking.
taxes.
To be clear,
Low
she's like,
taxes.
yeah.
Congresswoman Fedorchak addressed the House and Senate this week. I had notes for a column where I was going to write about how refreshingly boring she is.
She was
And,
refreshing.
and not as an insult at all. Like, just I am tired of being entertained by politicians.
Yeah.
And that is probably the shift. Entertainment.
Yes, I think I got very long-winded when I left the Senate, and if you could go back in time and when Senator Poolman made her speech on the floor of the Senate announcing she was not going to be running again, if that camera, and thank goodness it didn't, pan from being on Nicole, which was
I had
also on you.
the edge of me.
You were-
I
you
was
were
doing
right
this,
next to
yeah.
her. If
Ugly
it were to
cry.
pan over to me, I was sobbing. I was literally sobbing because so much of what Nicole was saying at the time is exactly how I was feeling. And I knew I was not going to run again. I just was not going to announce it during the session. It was, I describe it as having to be surrounded by the most simple form of like talk radio you can find, and never being able to turn it off.
And no offense to Michael Bell, who's in the audience.
Certainly not.
Hey, Heathy.
Okay.
How much of it was the camera being there? Because I thought, like, at Congress, they used to talk about the C-SPAN effect, where all of a sudden they got cameras in the chamber and the speeches got longer and the charts got more elaborate. And even cameras.
I wish
even,
the charts were elaborate, frankly.
Well, okay. Well, but even cameras, like even as a sort of metaphor for the larger social medias there.
Yeah,
Where
the audience, the platform.
there's an
We
audience
should
now for
probably
this
go
stuff.
back and look when the cameras started in the committee rooms, because
Which, by the way, I think it's good.
I
think
know
it's
you
good.
think it's good. I have never quite gotten there, and I get into a lot of arguments about this because I think you should have to put pants on to be able to go engage in your government. And so I've
Disagree.
This is the first time I've recorded this podcast with pants on.
this is too much information. No.
No, oh, come on. They're tough.
Sure, I suppose there's a couple of people. I don't think it is. When I heard you characterize it like that, Rob, and I'm sure there are a couple folks who do perform for the cameras. I also think it is a way to show people what is happening in their legislature, and I think they should see that. I think they should see the way their elected officials act,
Good
the
and
words
bad.
they use. Yep, the way they contribute or don't contribute, and whether or not that makes a difference in who they're electing is up to them. But I don't think a lot of it is performative. I think it is exactly who they are, and it just happens to be in front of a camera and in front of a microphone now.
So, Erin, I think you guys also have, Zach Ista referred to it earlier today, being a dad, right? You guys also were moms serving together, and I think there is a little bit of the kinship around being a female, being a mom, with not a lot of other moms. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, let's correct that, because
Please
there are
do.
a lot of parents.
I'm surprised that you correct me in public.
All right.
Like a day. I mean, if I got paid for this, if I got paid for correcting Chad Oban,
She'd be a rich woman.
rich woman.
One thing I'm not getting paid for is being a marriage counselor. So let's get back on topic.
We're doing fine.
I am going to avoid the very obvious joke I would otherwise make at Robport's expense, because your wife is lovely.
Yeah. Wow. I don't.
She is.
Yeah. You know she
Why
is.
would you say wow to that, Rob?
I don't know why she's coming at me.
Oh, that's what she does. So anyway, Erin,
Anyway, okay.
You're a woman in a sense. You were a woman.
I think that, like, there are a lot of parents in the legislature, probably more parents than there are not parents, but not at the generation we are at, not at the, like, kids in your
young kids.
household.
School age.
That's actually what I meant.
I know it's what you meant, but it also disregards
matter.
people. Words matter, thanks.
Oh, geez, you guys, easy.
But I think one of the things that was maybe easy for Jess and I to establish a relationship, around and be able to set aside those very distinct policy differences that we have. We're also like women who graduated around the same time. We grew up in very small towns. We experienced very similar things growing up in small towns. And then we're raising kids, around the same time. Her kids are a little bit older than ours are, but those are also bonding experiences and ways to relate to people where if you form those relationships with the people you serve with, it makes it so much harder to not see them as a person when you disagree with them on policy. And while I worked really hard to establish relationships with people, especially as a member of the minority and then super minority, but by the time I left, it became harder for me to separate those things. And I knew that was not going to be helpful in me being able to serve in a way I felt my district deserved to be served. So.
Well, we're going to put a pin in it there. Thank you, J. Bell, Erin. Thank you so much for being on.
Thanks,
Thanks,
for having
fellas.
us.
By the way, J. Bell and Eho. Erin, hello there.
Rob said he won't use it. Thank you, guys. Go unload the dishwasher.
Coming up on Plain Talk, I think you and I hit it off when we started doing it. In fact, somebody texted and just said, you and Chad got a good chemistry. And I just said, and I agree. I really enjoy doing it.
So I find that I generally have a good chemistry with most people, Rob. That might not be the case for you, but that's sort of where I'm at. Listen, they're eating this up right now. They're eating it up.
Don't go away. Plain Talk returns in a moment.
There are no shortcuts to making great food, and definitely no microwaves. At Peacock Alley and 40 Steak and Seafood, we don't take shortcuts. And our kitchen has a strict no microwave policy. Because great food doesn't come from microwaves. Peacock Alley, 40 Steak and Seafood, great food with no shortcuts.
The work done by North Dakota oil and natural gas workers is working to improve energy independence and national security, working to make America more competitive globally, and working to provide a better today and tomorrow for everyone in North Dakota and our country. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas, advancing the possibilities.
Welcome back to Plain Talk, where you're probably hearing peals of laughter because our producer announced to the audience that Chad and I will be taking pictures with them afterwards. And I guarantee you nobody in this crowd wants pictures with us.
I guarantee everyone wants pictures with us. Look at them. Look at their Michael Bell wants pictures. Corey Mock wants pictures.
Michael Bell gave me a hat during the interim.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to brag, but he gave me a hat a couple days ago.
Well, all right. We got some.
By the way, I think we're dropping Michael Bell's name too much.
Too much.
Yeah.
Too many plugs.
It should be M. Bell.
M. Bell. All right. Some gentleman from the radio industry.
Some random guy walking around downtown.
Okay.
Mark.
We've done enough on Michael Bell.
Good.
All right. We got some listener texts because we have that phone number that plays all the time that I have not memorized at all, so I don't know what the phone number is. Listen to the end credits and you'll hear the phone number that you can call or text.
Great hosting.
I know.
Like, great host.
You almost saw I've done this before.
Yeah.
Jim in West Fargo texted, said, enjoyed the cast on this truth and sentencing crusade of Wrigley's. Well done. So somebody enjoying, like you said, entertained.
Yeah, it was a very entertaining interview that Aaron and you did with Mr. Wrigley a week or two ago.
It was.
Maybe interview's the wrong word.
We also got some questions from the crowd here in Bismarck. Kelsey writes, great show and wings, which I haven't had any of the wings, but there are left wings and right wings.
I have not had any wings either. I'm hoping that some people save us some wings for when we're done in about 30 minutes.
Well, I kind of want to know what tastes better, the left wing or the right wing.
Well, I mean, agree to disagree.
Okay.
On that one.
Okay, so Kelsey asks, what surprised you most through doing the podcast, most memorable guest? So, I don't know, Chad, I kind of invited you into this to do it.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was inviting a lot of different people. I was kind of I've been doing the podcast for a while. I'll be honest, I was trying to find my way. Like, I didn't, I couldn't find really the flow that worked for me. And I think you and I hit it off when we started doing it. In fact, somebody texted and just said, you and Chad got a good chemistry. And I said, and I agreed. I really enjoy doing it.
So I find that I generally have a good chemistry with most people, Rob. That might not be the case for you, but that's sort of where I'm at. Listen, they're eating this up right now. They're eating it up. What surprises me about I am a little surprised at how much I enjoy it. Like, I look forward to sort of having an outlet that I don't normally get, talking about politics and policy and all those different things. I also think, you and I agree on quite a few things in sort of this strange political world we're currently in right now.
Yeah.
That's a little surprising.
I think it's a product that we can usually find our way to agreeing on it. We don't necessarily start out agreeing. Right. I think if we talk through it, we can find a place that we can both live with, which is how this is all supposed to work.
And I think the guests that I enjoy the most are ones that I don't have strong opinions on the policies we're talking about. We talked about Josh Christie the other day, AI. That was interesting.
That was a fantastic interview.
Because I didn't know anything about that. I think conversations we've had about the gentleman we had on recently from the Jewish defamation, I thought that was an interesting conversation. I think there were some visuals that were a little strange there, but I always enjoyed.
Our guest kind of forgot that show is an audio medium.
Right. But you know what my favorite show we've done is? Do you remember the opening day where you, I, and Kelly Armstrong just talked for an hour about baseball?
Yeah.
That was really good.
We enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I don't know if the audience enjoyed it.
Yeah, the listenership was 7 for that one.
They love it when we talk baseball.
Yeah. By the way, let's end with that.
Let's end with that.
I watched a video today of Dodger spring training and hearing the sound of the bat hitting the ball off of Mookie Betts' bat. Oh my God! It makes you forget it's 180 below zero outside.
I absolutely love the start of baseball season. I wish the Yankees had thought to hire a third baseman this year.
Yeah.
That would be nice.
If they only had some money.
If we only had some money. Well, Hal Steinbrenner needs another yacht. Peyton asks, Peyton, bring in the tough questions.
I saw this question before, and I was hoping that one would get
How do
stretched.
each of you, there's several parts of it. How do each of you define Christian nationalism? Is it a good or bad thing? Has there been an uptick in Christian nationalist legislation at the legislature and in recent years? Let's take the first part first. Christian nationalism, I think it's very, for me, it's very specific when you want laws and policies that elevate Christianity above the other religions. Because in my mind, the American tradition is we're treating all the religions equally. And I don't even believe in, because people say, well, the separation of church and state. And I don't, that is not how I see it, because I don't know that it needs to be separate, because the people who get elected to office, they're allowed to bring their faith with them, and they're allowed to govern through that lens, right? It's part of their convictions. Of course it's going to guide them if they have that faith. Where I think it transcends into being problematic is when you start trying to create a law that elevates your set of beliefs above others.
Yeah, so I agree with all of that. I also agree that we are seeing an uptick in legislation, and I think it's a bad thing. I've mentioned on this podcast many times sort of the big government Republicans that I think we're seeing often when it comes to issues around religious and other things. We've seen this session, 10 Commandments. We've seen chaplains in every public schools. We've seen all kinds of issues like that. Christ is King resolution. They've all been defeated so far. So I think that while there may be more efforts to sort of push a Christian nationalist agenda into our public sphere, I think the legislature is by and large defeating those things this session. And I think it's part of its elections, right? The moderate Republicans, the normie Republicans, traditional, had a really good primary.
Yeah.
So they're saying we don't have to support this stuff in the future, and I think that's good for the state.
That was my hypothesis, several weeks ago, was that some of these bills were going to have a tougher time. And again, I think it was because further removed from the pandemic, which created just some very weird cultural ripples. And then also, I think it proved that you don't have to kneel down to some of this stuff. There were a lot of moderate Republicans who resisted that, who got mailers sent out and it's saying they're anti-Christian, they're pro-pedophile, they're all pretty terrible things, and they survived. Some of those races were close. Don't get me wrong.
Well, I mean, a primary, there's going to be 1,000 people that vote, and it's going to be close no matter what, right? Because there's not that many votes. But I will say, I mentioned the 10 Commandments. I mentioned chaplains. I mentioned Christ is King. There was also a bill that I think was scheduled to be on the Senate floor today that would say intelligent design had to be part of science curriculum. It's basically creationism. And that got a do not pass out of committee as well. So I think that's another example of attempts. Unfortunately, that one was supported by both majority leaders. They were co-sponsors of that. They're in the paper saying they supported it. That's the kind of stuff that we shouldn't be pushing into our curriculum to push one religion over another. And again, I think teaching about religion and all religions, a super good thing.
And again, also, I don't have a problem with people bringing their faith. That's why I don't like the separation of church and state. I say you bring it all in and you treat it all equally, even up to, there's almost the sort of cliched debate about the 10 Commandments monument in the public square. I don't mind a 10 Commandments monument if you're going to make room for the other ones.
That's exactly right. I think if you're going to have the 10 Commandments, and we've talked about this, that, the idea that just simply posting the 10 Commandments or having a chaplain in a school is going to take care of all the ills of public society is short-sighted in terms of what we need in public policies.
I think it's lazy because it's really what they're saying is, kids are spending too much time on YouTube and they're doing all these terrible, and the thing is how old that is too, right? I'm old enough to remember that Hillary Clinton, Senator at the time, Hillary Clinton, telling me that I was going to grow up to be a terrible person because I played Doom video games. Like, I'm of that generation. Some of it's just teen panic of the sort that we've been seeing since, people had their skirts over their head about Elvis, swiveling his hips around. It's never
skirts over their head, huh? That's an interesting.
It's a good. That's why I make my living with words.
Yeah, written.
It's Yeah, well, I'm better in writing than I am speaking. The thing is it never changes. That's something that frustrates me and I guess surprises me too, because sometimes when we're talking about book bans, like, you read about, or like the intelligent design thing. Well, you can read about Inherit the Wind, like William Jennings Bryan and Clarence. We had this debate. And you kind of think, well, that's over, right? We had the debate, it's over, we're not going to do it again. Well, we do it again. It all repeats itself over and over.
Well, and I also think the Christ is King resolution. I mean, Jessica Bell said it earlier. There's more messaging bills like that earlier. That the only goal of that is to get people on record to say that legislators don't think Christ is king.
That's going to end up in a mailer.
Yeah, and
it's going to be in a mailer.
Stupid.
And it's going to be in big bold. It's going to be that somebody is against religious freedom or is against Christianity, and then way down in the fine print where they're hoping you don't look is going to be a reference to that vote. And that's really what that was all about.
And it's just the opposite of religious freedom, right? I mean, space policing, and they say, it doesn't choose one religion over another. It does.
Well, Representative Van Winkle made it very clear on the floor how she felt. And I don't have her quote in front of me, but she essentially said, this is the truth. And it doesn't matter what anybody else believes. This is the truth. Therefore, it's okay to put it in there. Well, it's the truth for you. Yeah. It's the truth in your, and that's fine. If Christians feel that way, that's fine. The problem is we live in a pluralistic society where everybody's guaranteed freedom of religion, and we cannot have the government endorsing one over the other.
Yes, and it's such a simple thing. And you said earlier it's hard to identify conservative, liberal, where people are. It's hard to identify some of these bills as being conservative when it really is the government making decisions for people. Yeah, I mean, and the idea of the library books. Something that drives me crazy is this legislature and the Senate's passed a bill that says parents have the fundamental rights over every aspect of their children's life. Then they pass bills that say, well, libraries have to do this, and we have to force them to do the pledge. We have to do this. We have to do this. So you appreciate the fundamental rights of parents as long as those parents are doing exactly what you want them to do. That frustrates me. I mean, I may be progressive, I may be left to center, but on some of these things, I just want the government to stay the hell out of my life and let me raise my kid and my family.
Exactly right. As far as whether or not there's been more, I don't know. I would have to go back and count bills. I feel like we have about the same number of cultural bills. I'm trying to think of one that's passed yet, though.
Yeah, we were talking during the break. I can't think of one, and there's a couple that have not been defeated, but they've gotten do not passes out of committee. Again, I think the legislature deserves some amount of credit for standing up against these things because we haven't seen that in the past. But I think that some people are maybe they feel more comfortable in their actual opinions and how they can handle the politics of it.
I want to pivot from there to something we talked about. It kind of closed the show out. I think a common theme we interviewed 2 current lawmakers and then 2 former lawmakers. And the thing is, the legislature's changing. Some of it is just the culture's changing. There's a political, ideological realignment.
More nationalization.
But then the other thing, term limits are coming down. I think the legislature is going to have to change some ways they do their business. I think it's just going to have to happen. And I don't know what it is. I mean, we talked about the bill allowing the leaders to sort of act as a clearinghouse for legislation and try to condense some of these ideas. That's going to be tough because sometimes there's a lot of big egos out there and they want to be the one on the bill.
But we don't need one legislator introducing 35 bills. We talked to Senator Weber about this. He said he introduced 4 bills and he's going to usher every one of those through.
Right.
If you are somebody like Ben Koppelman who's introducing 30 some odd bills, he's not doing due diligence to make sure those are good bills and make sure people understand those bills.
He's supporting.
Yeah.
And supporting them in committee, supporting them in.
And sometimes if you believe in a policy, you have to do some organizing and you have to build coalitions around that. But I mean, I would like to see, none of these things are going to be particularly popular. I'd like to see limits on the amount of bills that an individual legislator can introduce. I'd like to see annual sessions. I do think that would make it harder for citizen legislators to serve, so we have to pay them more. But I also would like to see us to be able to kill bills in committee. I mean, we've got to be the only state that can't defeat a bill in committee. So you have these committees who spend hours and hours and hours debating something. They give it a 10-2 do not pass, like the Prairie Public funding. Send to the floor and they pass it. That's not the people who did the due diligence. Yeah, what's the point of the committee if you're just going to let the people on the floor vote? So defeat bills on the
Well, even if we're doing amendments on the floors now too.
Yeah.
What are we even doing in committee? And,
Well-
and the thing, I'm not,
it's in a minority voice, the floor amendments that I kind of like.
and I'm not necessarily criticizing that, but it seems like we're making the committee superfluous.
Right.
And that's,
And I also think having annual sessions, and maybe it's 40 and 40 or something like that, we can more effective, like the interim to me is a joke. When you pass interim studies and an interim committee basically has one person come and talk about it and, oh, we've done the study and nothing comes about that. I think there's things that we can do better during the interim as well to make the session more efficient. Because I think one of the things Senator Hogue said, that you end up just trying to churn out the bills when you have 1,200 or
well, the problem
1,100.
is you're sending a lot of things to study to the interim committees. A lot of them don't get studied.
Right. Yeah. But I think even just like at this point, leading up to crossover, they've got to get all these bills out. And so you do have committees who are maybe moving too quick on things because they've spent so much time on so many bills.
The message I took from the interviews tonight is there's change coming for the legislature, whether we like it or not. And some things are going to have to change in order for that body to continue serving the state of North Dakota the way it needs to.
Well, and I think the other thing that we need to reflect on as a state is the conversation we had with Jessica and Erin. Both of them are very happy to not be in the legislature. But I think we need people like Erin and Jessica who are willing to serve in the legislature. What can we do to make this environment better so more people with kids, family, younger, whatever, can serve? And I think part of it is
Sorts of people. We want a spectrum.
yeah, we want people and we're going to have to pay people more in order to do that.
It's always unpopular.
It's always unpopular, but we don't want just people who can afford to be in the legislature to be in the legislature. We need a variety of different opinions. And if we want better policy, we need to have long conversations.
I think, and last comment, I think we want to avoid the trajectory that has us ending up where Washington, D.C.'s at right now.
Yeah, you don't want a full-time legislature either, right?
No, but also we don't want the dysfunction either, because our legislature is still functional. There's still a lot of good work being done there.
Even though sometimes you watch the House floor and you question it, I would encourage you to go and watch the fluoride conversation from earlier today. I didn't feel like the legislature was functioning during that conversation.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to say about fluoride. All right, we're going to stop
I'm
there.
for it.
I'm ambivalent one way or the other. I just don't believe that it's this terrible thing. Anyway. All right. Well, that was great. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk again.
That was fun.
The North Dakota oil and natural gas industry works here, and works here, and here, and even works here. By creating nearly 50,000 jobs statewide and generating billions of tax dollars annually to support our infrastructure, flood protection projects, and our schools. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas, advancing the possibilities.
There are no shortcuts to making great food, and definitely no microwaves. At Peacock Alley and 40 Steak and Seafood, we don't take shortcuts, and our kitchen has a strict no microwave policy, because great food doesn't come from microwaves. Peacock Alley, 40 Steak and Seafood, great food with no shortcuts.